Good afternoon and good evening to everyone. Thank you so much for joining. This is Rolls-Royce's Be Curious series. This is the first video of 6, so you have 5 more to follow. We're joined by people in the United Kingdom, in Spain, and as far as in India as well, which must mean it's very late for you guys. But I'm super excited that you're joining us for this first class. It's all about storytelling. Before we go into intros, just to make you aware, we've got people from the Early Careers team on here as well who will be answering your chats. So if you have any questions at any point in time, just put them in the chat. Either I will take them directly or the Early Careers team, specifically a lady called Stella, who'll be here on with me today. She'll be asking them to me and I'll be answering your questions. So without further ado, I'm Arevinth. I work at Rolls-Royce. I am a storyteller, which covers anything from marketing to strategy to board directions, pitches, to internal comms, to bringing the teams together. So it's a varied role with many applications. And today I want to take you through the art and the science of storytelling. So these lessons that I'm teaching with you today are not things that I thought of myself, but these are things that I've experienced myself. I've gathered them in my tenure at Rolls-Royce and in other areas of my life. And I'm sharing them with you as good practice so that you can take from it what you like, challenge what you like, take everything with a pinch of salt. Don't just believe it straight, but I'm interested in seeing what you can do with it and what you think of it. We've guided 4 basic principles and 4 or 5 applications for you in this way of storytelling. So I've got a quote in here as well from Plato, which is those who control the stories control the world. And you might have heard stuff like history is written by the winners and things like that. So at the end of the day, that what is remembered is usually remembered in forms of stories. And it's the memory that's passed down from generation to generation to generation. It's how humankind communicate and make sense of the world in the context that it's happening in. So it's really the stories that come to life. And that's why it's so important that even in a business setting, that you're able to narrate, tell the story that you want to tell, because that's one of the most powerful ways to leave an impact when you're communicating with someone. And in today's world, there's so much noise that it is very difficult to be remembered, especially when you're starting out early in your career. But 2, also make sure that what you're intending to say is understood by the other person without any misunderstandings or misinterpretations, or the message is not construed. So that's why today's session is all about the art and the science of storytelling. The art is the intuitive side of things, the interpretation and the your improv skills and your thinking on your feet and how you marry certain things together. And the science is the repeatable, measurable, the things that seem to work. I'm going to help you break down your stories, but also if you were inclined to bring presentation slides, how to position slides and things like that. So hopefully there is some value for you guys, something to think about. That's the very least that I want, but hopefully something to take away as well. So why stories? Stories have been with us since the beginning of age. So this is before we started writing. This is before we knew how to read. If you think about people who sit around a campfire, tell each other what happened that day, pass on messages in form of songs, in form of poems, in form of stories. The stories are embedded in nearly anything that we have. So if you think about your favorite song or your favorite movie or your favorite book, all of them are underpinned by stories if you look deep enough. And the point I was making earlier is actually quite pertinent here. If it is such an innate skill that has surpassed the test of time, why is it that we don't use it in business? We shy away from using stories. We are saying, oh no, it has to be professional, whatever that means. It has to be in this set way. I need to sound like this. I need to sound sophisticated. I need to sound smart. I need to be seen this way. I need to be seen that way. In today's world, you being authentic is far more important than you appearing a certain way, because any mold you might need to fit has already been broken in the last couple of years. Any way of appearance that is expected of you has at the very least been shattered when COVID hit. During COVID, all of us had and an insight into our personal lives because of video chats, the circumstances, the backgrounds. Is your laundry in the background? Have you got a baby crying on your lap? We all realize that we're in the same boat. And recently I read a phrase which I liked even better. We might not be in the same boat, but we're all on the same sea. So everyone's conditions and circumstances are very different, but we're all traveling in the same context. So in that case, why do we need to pretend to talk differently when it comes to a business setting? And that's the challenge that I pose today. And that's why I bring storytelling to the table as an answer to that challenge. So if this is such an embedded, intrinsic, intuitive method, then it is absolutely in our interest to embrace it and take it to the workplace. But I'll tell you how I do it and how it has worked out for me. You can choose to challenge it, or you can choose to explore it, and you can tell me why it might work, why it might not work, or what questions you might have to apply it in your context, because you might be in a different environment with different people. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the 4 principles that I've put together for you guys that help me build stories. So the very first thing you always must do, regardless of any form of communication, is earn your audience's trust. And that's because every relationship in your life has got a foundational element, and that is trust. If someone doesn't trust you, they won't listen to you. If someone doesn't trust you, they won't accept your message. If someone doesn't trust you, they will doubt what you're saying, even if you're saying oxygen is important to breathe. They will actually just question everything because there is something about your relationship that is sticky. That's a sticking point. That's not built on trust. There is a chance for a mistrust to happen, and that is very important to understand. So, what does it mean to earn their trust? So, there are some things that are fair in life and some things that are not fair in life. The not so fair things are like when you enter a room, someone will judge you. There will be biases, there will be stereotypes, there will be judgments. While that's not right, you can control it and influence it if you're aware of it. So if it's the way you dress, if it's the way you sound, if it's the way you speak, if it's the way you enunciate certain words, if it's the way you do certain things, be aware of how it comes across without losing your authenticity, what I said earlier. So you're not changing yourself for someone, but you're aware of how someone will judge you even before you've uttered the first word. The way you enter the room, the way you hold yourself, the posture, the body language, all of that has an influence and an impact on whether they trust you or not. And there are things you can do, we can talk about that in a bit, that will improve and increase the trust they have in you. So very first thing, whatever you do, earn their trust. Another thing you can do to improve their trust is, or sorry, to earn their trust is to talk about what you're there to talk about. So make your agenda very clear. Tell them what is that you want to get out of it. What is it that you're here to do? Once you do that, their defense mechanisms will drop. That means that they're aware of what your ambition and your aim is, and they can then see, okay, does this suit me or does this not suit me? Do I need to distance myself? Do I need to keep my guard up? Do I need to shield myself? Or can I embrace it? Can I open it? Can I join you on this journey? So all of that is encapsulated in earn their trust. From the first minute you walk into the room, and even from the way you send the pre-read, any form of communication has to have this at the root of it. So make sure that you're aware of that sphere. That trust is very important, and you have the influence or the chance to influence how much they trust you. Some people you're never going to get the trust. Some people will always trust you regardless of what you do, but there's a significant portion in the middle who are influenceable by the things you do. Maybe you guys were aware of it, maybe you weren't, but this is the first one that I want to pass on to you. The second pillar, make it count. So this is about relevance. Why should the person listening to you pay attention to you? How does this matter to them? How does it affect them in what they're trying to do? How does it add value to them in their journey? So for that, you would have to do some background research on why someone's listening to you, what their interests are, what their engagement methodology is and their model. So how do they like to be spoken to? But also, why is it relevant to them? How are they going to find this very useful? And it's funny that very often we put everything on slides that we want to say. Well, it would be so much smarter to just put something on a slide that you want them to take away. So focusing your takeaway message and making sure it's synthesized to a level that's easy for them to accept and understand is so important. Because without that, if you just charge at them with everything you want, at some point they'll be saturated and they'll switch off. That could be sooner or later. And you see this in behaviors like taking their phones out. You can see this in situations like where someone is looking at you, but they're actually looking past you, thinking what to eat for lunch. Um, there are certain things that you will automatically see when your audience is disconnecting. And that is when it isn't counting for them. So it is important that at every stage in your presentation or in your communication, you are constantly reinforcing why it matters to them. So we've got earn their trust, which means that you have no alternative agenda, you're there for their interest and that it is going to further them. Make it count is how it's going to further them, qualify them, how it's relevant, how it's going to help them in their journey. And the next two pillars go hand in hand. The next two pillars are help them learn. So this has got an educational element to it. So you might be presenting to someone who is more knowledgeable than you in the field. And that happens very frequently. The power dynamics are very different early on in the career. How can I present to someone as a supposedly expert if they are the real expert in the room? How might I be able to interest them or pick their interest when they probably already know this and they've seen this from 100 other people already, whether I'm an intern or a grad or an apprentice or a new starter or someone who's got a career change. How do I get them to get hooked? And that is with the education content. So either you show them something new that they didn't see before, or you show them something in a new light, something they hadn't thought of before, something they hadn't framed before, or you combine certain things that they weren't aware of before that you could combine. So if there is something that you're aware of, a cross-discipline tool set or something in the digital world that you think, oh, you know what, this is if you apply this process which is used in this discipline and you want to bring it into here, you can benefit because it'll cut your lead time down by like 30% or something. All of a sudden they've learned something. Whether they agree with it or not, it doesn't matter. But they would have learned something. You would have tweaked their interest because you've made them aware of something that they didn't know before. And that is super important. So always think about in your communication presentation, in your way of engaging, not only how to add value to them, but to make it more interesting. Am I sharing something that they weren't aware of before, or sharing in a way that they weren't aware before? So that goes hand in hand with let them have fun. Done a numerous amounts, several presentations of really dry, bone dry, to the point, whether it's pitch decks for startups or whether it's strategy decks. And you can just see the audience slowly wearing down because it's just not fun. It's been a long day. They're waiting for lunch and it's just, yeah, they're just really, really tired. But a quick joke or a bit of humility or a reference to something that they didn't expect makes such a huge difference because the minute they laugh, they're back in the room with you. And statistics show that when someone's having fun, they retain information, they learn a lot more than if they're not having fun. So remember the education element from before, and this one with about having fun goes hand in hand. It means that they're able to absorb the knowledge and the information that you're passing because you've already done the homework and you've dropped their defense mechanisms and you've told them why they need to listen. And then when it comes to the message, they're able to actually absorb it a lot faster. So these are the four pillars that I've put together for you guys in terms of building a story. How you do this is the art. The building blocks themselves are the science. What comes next is a couple of options for you to build a story as a narrative, whether you use slides or whether you use just a story. And we'll come to that in a minute. I'll pause here and just check if you guys have got any questions in the chat, because I can't actually see the chat, but I know that Stella's keeping an eye on it. So,
Hi, yes,
hey.
yes, it's some really great questions starting to come in.
Okay.
So we've just ran a poll about how confident you feel about communicating.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something that comes out of that poll, that so 56% says yes, they feel quite confident, but then there's the ones that don't feel confident. So I think one of the questions that is being asked really is, how can you come across to become more confident with communicating?
Okay, great question. So I'm German, in case you guys didn't hear from my accent. So Brexit is a soft spot for me. 56% isn't very high. It is just over half. So for those who are confident, I hear you guys. I root for you. I'm impressed by you. For those who are not, it took me a long time to learn to get my confidence, because even now, before coming on this call, I still have nervous jitters, and they'll never go away. They just keep me in the zone. Um, and I think for me, it's part of who I am. So confidence is an interesting thing. Confidence is your perceived ability to be able to pull it off without failing. Whether you need confidence or not is a personal choice, is a personal question. Some people are not confident, but they just go and do it, and somehow they do it. To be confident, there is an art science, like I said, an art side to it and a science side to it. If you look at TED Talks, for example, and you look at people like Amy Cuddy, I think, who talks about superposes. So 10 minutes before your presentation, you do breathing exercises and you stand really tall. Like, you don't do any postures that make you small, but you stand arms out, you do supermoon pose, or you start doing your exercises in terms of enunciation, pronunciation, your tone modality exercises. You do this in the bathroom, in the toilet, wherever. So massive public speakers who are still very scared of going on stage do this all the time, literally all the time. On my In my alternative career, I'm actually an actor, so I do a lot of film and TV productions. And all of my colleagues, you see actors of massive talent who you would not expect. They all go through this. So there are ways of improving your confidence by cheating yourself into feeling more confident, which is through power poses, self-talk. You guys might know Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps is arguably the most successful swimmer in the world, or was. He's got a lot of gold medals at the Olympics. So I studied business and sports at university, and we went into athletes' performance a lot. And Michael Phelps used to listen to one song on loop, which talks about how he's a champion, and he needed that reinforcement because that's what's going to give him the confidence to go that little bit extra. Audley Harrison, so a UK boxer, at the Beijing Olympics, he we were doing a study with him because he was a student at Brunel where I was studying, and he listened to Japanese folk music because they stimulate his alpha brain waves, so he's able to perform up to 20% more than when he was just training by himself without music. So there are certain influences you can have, visual stimuli. Um, you have audio stimuli, whichever the pronunciation. I'm going to go with stimuli, whatever. Um, Multiple stimuluses. Um, then there are things that pep talks. Pep talks work really well looking at yourself in the mirror. But the question is, do you already have self-confidence? Do you believe yourself? If you tell yourself you can do it, you're going to be amazing, absolutely smash it. Do you believe yourself? That's a massive question that is a journey for everyone, wherever you are. Starting to believe in yourself starts with trusting that when you say something, you're going to do it, you're actually able to do it. The more you're able to prove to yourself that you do it, say, if I'm going to sit down, I'm going to go to the gym. Today, I'm going to go to the gym. How often do I do it? I'm going to cut out sweets. Whatever I say to myself, how often do I follow through? That's the question of discipline. And the discipline is where the self-confidence comes from. And that's where confidence itself comes from when you tell yourself, if you're going to go down the route of pep talk, self-pep talk. You can practice. That is the most successful way of gaining confidence, which is testing it out. You get a friend and you present it to the friend. The friend is hardly going to say something nasty and scary and painful, but either they'll be really nice about it or they'll be critical, but portray the messages and convey them in an amicable way, so it's constructive. Nothing replaces practice. All the power poses and psychological support can be undone, but practice becomes muscle memory. To undo muscle memory, if you've done it long enough, is far more difficult because it's a new habit that needs to be relearned as opposed to an old one that needs to be broken. So those are some of the sources that I can think of right now for building confidence. But the key takeaway messages is you don't overemphasize on trying to feel confident before you go on stage or before you say anything or before you do a presentation. The perceived lack of confidence can also be good, and you can use that. You can use that adrenaline. You can use that nervous energy. You can use that as long as you are capable of turning that into something that helps you, that propels you forward, that motivates you. So both is possible. It's absolutely down to you to find out who you are, what works for you, test it, trial it. I've had so many presentations where I've just fallen flat on my face because I misread the room or I misread the confidence levels or things like that. And in those situations, you just pick up. You just see, okay, what else can I do now? And then you just go with it. So that's my answer. I hope it's helpful.
No, that's brilliant, that is, because quite a lot of points that are coming through is about that first step to confidence lies in being able to tell yourself that you're feeling confident. And I think really that's where you're coming from as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one avenue. So self-pep talk is one avenue. Doesn't work for everyone. It only works if you believe yourself. And yeah, absolutely. Self-pep talk works well if you believe yourself. Hearing from others. So positive affirmation is another one. So it depends who you want to hear it from. That makes the biggest difference to your heart and to your conscience. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So, like I said, the next bit are things of how do you build a story? What elements do you need to have a story? This is how you approach people, what we've covered so far. So, earn their trust, make it count, help them learn, let them have fun. The next bits are the elements that you should include in a story to make the story quite compelling. And you can do it on slides, not on slides. You can do it in a Prezi, you can do it in whatever you want. You can do audio narration, you can do a video, anything. So, first one is create an impactful opening. This is all about how you introduce your subject to the audience. And there are usually 4 ways to do it. One is you ask a question. And if you ask a question, the audience inevitably thinks of an answer. Whether they care about the question or not, it doesn't matter. But if you ask a question, in their minds, automatically they're hooked because they're thinking of an answer and they're checking whether it's the right answer, wrong answer, it's the best answer or not so strong answer. What do you think is the answer? Your mind automatically goes into the direction where you want them to go, engage with the content. So ask a question is the first way of creating an impactful opening. The other way is to share a stat or a statistic. If you literally have a slide with a statistic on there, then people will be drawn in to understand what it means. They will be thinking about, do they agree? Do they disagree? Is it in the right context? They might challenge it. They might be amazed by it. They might be wondering, how can this be true? Whatever you do, the statistic will help you bring your audience to you to then continue on your narrative and to say, okay, cool, this is what my story is all about. So we've had ask a question or lead with a statistic. The next one is tell a story. I know it's ironic that I'm saying tell a story to start a story, but gone are the days where you say, oh, imagine yourself, you're standing on the ocean, blah 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 blah. So don't lead with imagine yourself as, but very much lead with mornings at 9 p.m. Sorry, mornings at 9 p.m. Mornings at 9 a.m. I tend to go and I get stuck in traffic because, and then you talk about why traffic is horrible or whatever it is. But the minute you create a scenario rather than talking about imagine yourself as, that's when they will start imagining themselves in the shoes of the character that you're trying to create. So very often in pitch decks and in startup decks, whether it's communication or pitch deck or whether it's to hire talent, they illustrate the problem they're trying to solve by using that kind of method. So they will then create the narrative and the environment by sharing the situation with you. And the last one is a weird one. It's about using a prop. So if you're presenting in the room, it's very powerful. You can use a prop. This can be either a demo material tool that you pass around, or this can be something that you just bring randomly. The example I always list on these kind of calls and these kind of webinars are, a person once came on to do a presentation and they brought a skull. They just brought a skull and put it on the table, and then they started their presentation. Once they finished, they just picked up the skull and went. But the entire time during the presentation, the audience was hooked and was waiting to see when they're going to make a reference to the skull and why was the skull even there and what are you going to do with it. Very similarly, during a sales conversation, what I've seen before, people come to do the sales pitch, and when they do the sales pitch, the people listening, they were disengaging. They were like, look, I know you want to sell into me. I have got no intention of selling. I've taken this meeting because my boss told me to. Just tell me what you want to do and then we'll get it over and done with. We'll promise to have a follow-up and then we'll never talk to each other again. So what the sales guy did, he brought in a box with him. And on the box, just with a like we say edding in Germany because like a marker pen. With a marker pen, he wrote magic box. Literally just wrote magic box, took it in with him, put it on the table. The entire time during the conversation, they were hooked, trying to find out what's in the magic box. So they were actually listening to him, and in the magic box, there were product demos. So when he was dishing them out, they were actually engaging with the products, and it helped him actually land sales. Had he not done that, it may have reduced the chance. So it's about the impact you're having. I'm not necessarily saying that it has to be only a sales environment, but when you're opening up, the first few seconds are so important because that's when your audience decides whether they want to listen or not. Just like whether they decide whether they want to trust you or not, this impactful opening makes a huge impact. Oh, it makes a huge difference to whether they will continue or not, whether they take their phones out, whether they disengage or not. So the 4 ways of creating impactful opening are ask a question, lead with a statistic, create a narrative or a situation, and use a prop. But you got to be obviously slick with it, and you can't overuse any of these 4 ways because then you just get used to it. So creating an impactful opening is the first one. Second one is have a unique hero entry. I get asked about this a lot. What does this mean? What if I don't have a hero? What if there's no person involved in my presentation? A hero is the protagonist of your story. It needn't be a person. It can be a statistic. It can be a situation that's arisen. It can be any form of challenge that you personify into a hero. So if you've got, I'm going to use a finance example. If you've got a budget challenge or you've got a burning platform and you've got someone who's suffering, you can make sure that there's a character called, say, Rob or someone, and he's struggling with this because. Or you can say something like, we've got this decision to make, and this decision is being difficult to reach because. So whatever way you want to make, whatever you make the subject of your presentation, if you personalize it into a character, then you can give that character a unique entry. And that is very important because if you give your theme or your topic a personalized character, then the human brain will start deciding whether it roots for it or not, whether it will start saying, yes, I'm on your side, I want you to win, or whether they say, no, I really don't like you, I don't want you to win, I'm going to try to be a barrier. Whatever you do, humans are social animals. We will always either cling on into a pack or disengage. Very rarely will we just be neutral, even to a certain degree. So I'm not saying you're always going to get in high engagement, 100% or 0. It is continuum, but your chances of getting higher engagement increases when you start personalizing the subject of your topic. Subject of your presentation. So try to think of it in this way. What am I trying to share with you? What's the topic of my presentation? How can I turn this into a personalized character? How do I give it a name? How do I give it a background story? How do I make sure it has a relationship with someone? And that is where we come to the next point. If you have a hero, a protagonist, you'll have an antagonist. You'll have an opposite force deterring it from achieving what it wants to achieve. So if you've got a personalized character, they have a background story and they want to do something in their life, in their life of this presentation, how do I show what is stopping it from reaching it? And that is where you build the climax. So within a few minutes of explaining what the entry is, what the subject is, and who the hero is, you also explain what their struggle is. Why is it that we've come to this decision point today? Why is it that something needs to happen now? Why is it that this is so important for people to hear and do something about right now? So all of that is super important. And this is where the building the climax comes in. It is a decision point. It is a problem that needs solving. And the important bit is if you share the problem, then people will start thinking about the problem itself, and they'll start understanding the context and the factors that it's contingent upon. So they will start being understanding towards and sensitive towards your scenario, what you're bringing to the table, rather than dismissing it as, oh, it's just someone early careers. They don't know what they're talking about. Let them gain some more experience. Do it this way, they will start rooting for your character and they'll start trying to help you with whatever's in their power. Next step is very important. When you build a climax and you create a point of contention, it is down to you to show that there's a way out. They're not going to do the thinking for you, as they'll just get frustrated that you come with problems but not with solutions. So in your story that you're building, you've got the beginning of introducing the subject, you've got the character, you've got what it is that they're struggling with, and then you've got the part of how they're going to overcome it. This is where your solutions are in. These are the choices of things, or the one thing, or the three things, or the five things, or the sometimes nothing that you can do about it, that people need to be aware of, and they can have an impact on, or they can choose to support. If you want something from your audience, this is where you put the ask as well. If you want your audience to take something away, this is where you highlight which one of the options you want them to take away. This is where you highlight, this is what I want you to make sure that you support me in, because as a narrator or as a storyteller, you always want something from your audience. There's no such thing as, oh, I'm just telling you for your own benefit and I don't want anything from you. It is up to you as a narrator to understand what you want from the audience. Is it approval? Is it an ego boost? Is it confidence? Is it an engagement? Is it for them to say that you've done a good job? So praise, is it recognition? Is it that there's engagement, so there's fun? Is it that you get the self-satisfaction that you've taught them something? What is it that it is for you? Because once you're aware of it, then it almost doesn't matter anymore, because you just keep an eye out for it and you're like, okay, cool, yeah, that's fine. So you understand what motivates you, and that's what will resonate. So coming back to this point here, always have a solution when you list a problem, or an approach. Sometimes it's just good enough to have an approach, even if you don't have a solution. So this is a challenge that my character has. This is how I'm going to approach it, and this is what I think the result will be. That will mean that someone will either guide you, or they'll educate you, or they'll support you. But they will be engaged, and that's super important. And the last one, be prepared for the sequel. So if you've done a good job and you've taken people on a journey and they start rooting for your characters and they've started to take a liking to how you tell the story, or what story you tell, or the subject, or the character, or how you approach certain things, they will come back to you. They will ask for more. Sometimes it can be daunting, sometimes it can be intimidating, sometimes it can be feeling like they're using you, exploiting you. So be prepared for it. Where are your limits? Under what circumstances and conditions are you happy to support? How does it work for you? And be confident about that bit, because you're adding value to the business. It's not the business who's adding value to you. Yes, you're being compensated in form of remuneration, benefits, and things like that, but in today's world, a business cannot exist without its employees or workers or whatever relationship you're standing in the organization with. But a person can exist without a business. So that bit is super important, realizing one's own value. And therefore, when they come for a sequel or for the next time, take as a compliment, take strength from it, and be prepared of how you'd like to do it again. If you know that before you do the first time, then you know that the second time will be a lot easier. So these are the points of how to build a narrative. Like I said, take them with a pinch of salt. They're not for everyone, and some people will say it's load of I'm not sure what word I'm allowed to say on this call. Load of garbage, junk. But
yeah, we're getting some really great questions
yeah,
coming in. So
okay.
one of them is when you're asked a challenging question that you are unsure of the answer and need a moment to think it over, what methods can you use to still show off confidence?
Honesty, honesty. If you're able to show vulnerability of not knowing an answer, you're more confident than when trying to blag it. Then you're more
Right.
confident than trying to show that you know an answer by trying to bridge the time and come to it. There are bridging techniques. So there's delegation, there's deflection, there is deferral. So all of these words, what they mean is that you pass the buck on to someone else or to a later point. So, oh, that's a great question. So there is an expert in the team who can do that. That's a
Right.
great question, but have you thought about this? Blah 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 blah. So you can push the ball back on that. But what you really need to do is just say, "You caught me off guard there. Give me a minute. I'll tell you my approach." Or actually, I've never thought of it the way you asked me. I actually like it. Let me just think about it because it is adding value. If you're honest about the fact that you're caught off guard, people will like you way more than if you're trying to say, great question. Right. So what I would say is never do that because
Right.
people see through it. So don't try to blag it. Don't try to
So it's that
bridge the gap.
honesty that's
Yeah.
really quite key then, isn't it? No,
It,
that's really
yeah.
good. And following on from that really is about how long is it, how long is too long to break before answering a question? Do you get straight into it or do you give it a bit of time?
Go with the intuition. Go with what you think. Read the room and go with what the audience wants because some people, in the way they ask the question, you will understand whether they want a quick or a considered answer, and that's very important. So that is how you make the choice. If someone's really emotional, they feel strong about something, make sure that you give them immediately the response that you understand where they're coming from. And I hope that genuinely you do. If not, don't do it. Always be authentic. But make sure you calm them down before you come back to the subject of the talk. It's always important to be on the matter of the subject you're talking about rather than the person. So how long? I always like to be direct and honest and straight, which means that I won't leave much time because having a considered answer shows that you might even try to hide something. But there are times when I've said to someone when they've asked me a question, an intellectual question, I said, I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but if you give me a minute, I can tell you how I would approach it. And I've done that in interviews a lot in assessment centers. I've done that a lot in one-to-one engagements where I am being tested and clearly the other person knows the answer and I clearly don't. So often they're impressed by the fact that I approach it a certain way, sometimes that way that they wouldn't have approached it, rather than me trying to figure out that I know the answer.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. And we've got a few more, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
So how do you stop yourself going off point?
Simple. It comes with practice. So when I plan to say certain things, I always think about what do I want people to take away, and I keep discipline to those points. Everything else, the additional information to enhance the takeaway points. It's never starting with I want you to know all of X, Y, Z, everything that I know, because that's just not information overload, and it's lazy on behalf of the narrator. It's so lazy if you don't distill it. And I think it was Churchill who said it. I'm really sorry. I didn't have time to write you a short presentation, so I wrote you a long one. And there is a lot to brevity. I think in the English language, there is a nice phrase which says brevity is wit. And that's what this is all about. So if you are thinking you're going to go off pace, you can always make sure that you come back to the set that you're and comedians do this all the time when the audience are heckling them, or when they stand-up comedians, this is when they're struggling, they come back to their set piece. So you have like a framework, you have like a ladder that you go on step by step by step, and that's super important. The other thing is check in with the audience, see if they start disengaging, because you might still be on your narrative, but that narrative might not be right for them anymore. They may have moved on, or they may have been interested in something else, or they want to talk about something else, or they are just not interested in that particular topic. So check in with the audience, read the room, and in the worst case scenario, when I've gone completely off topic and everyone's disengaged, I've just turned around like, I've lost you all, haven't I? And everyone laughed, and they were back in the room, and they're like, yeah, you have. It's like, okay, cool. Where did I lose you? What bit? And then they told me, because I asked a question, they answered, they engaged, and then the talk went back on track. Um, Always be responsive. That is difficult, is improvisation skills, but it comes with experience, and it's something that you just learn on the job, and it's not expected to be able to do that straight away, but you learn it quicker than you think. You just go put yourself out there in the fire, and you'll stumble. The first time I did it, I was breaking out in sweat, like under armpits, on my forehead. I started having a frog in my throat. I was struggling to talk, and all of that was happening. So despite that, I was there because I had a message to tell, and people were prepared to listen to me, and they saw me as someone who they want to listen to. And because they all gave me that chance, I was able to pick up the pieces and carry on. So that's how I would answer the question.
Thank you. So we've got some ones that want to know about you, really. So
Okay.
how long did it take you to feel confident in telling stories?
Hmm. Okay, if you listen to my mum, she'll say I was always telling stories, and she's actually got cassette, like tape recordings of it. But when I was in school, great sign. When I was in school, I was a kid who always got teased, and then I had something really cool to say 3 days afterwards. And I thought of it in the shower. And I was like, oh gosh, I would have said, should have said that. I was also the person who was socially a little awkward, and who struggled to know when to say the right thing intuitively. So when it came to presentations and speeches and things like that, it took me a long time. It took me a very long time to actually find my route, be centered. A lot of it had to do with not trying to impress people, like trying to understand that I'm good enough the way I am. I don't need to impress people with the way I talk or what I say. A lot of it comes down to being confident in just accepting my journey and saying, I am on a journey, which gives me hope because I am going to move from where I am today to somewhere else where I'm tomorrow. And this is just part of the experience that I'm on. Sounds very philosophical, but genuinely it made a difference to me because it meant that I wasn't going to be stuck in that little place that I was before. And I said, okay, cool. I'm just going to throw myself out there. So I'd say a couple of years. But it got easier and easier and easier. And you know what? The more I did it, the more people started liking me. And when I decided I didn't actually care whether people liked me or not, that's when they liked me more. That's when they started responding to my jokes more. My wife keeps repeating to me that I'm not funny, but I, I I do think I am to some extent. I just had a daughter, so she's 9 months old. Sorry, 9 weeks old and a half. So she still laughs at all my jokes. So it's just certain things that give you confidence or rob your confidence, and you just learn to ignore both. I don't seek to be extremely confident. I don't seek to be extremely avoiding anyone who robs my confidence. By now, you can't become balanced because there's enough, you've got enough going for you. You've got enough that you can identify with and say, you know what, even if I mess it up, doesn't matter. That doesn't, it's no representation of me. It's just a presentation. It's just a communication. It's just a talk. It's just an article that I wrote. It's just a thing I said. It doesn't reflect who I am to the fullest because there's more to me than just that one thing. Once I realized that, it happened quite quick. But to realize that, I had to fall flat on my face many times. So I'd say a couple of years, maybe 3 years. But it started early, started in high school, and then it went from there because, yeah, when you're sick of being socially awkward and you're sick of just being the kid who's teased, you just don't care after a while. I'm going to get teased whether I do this or that. So I'm just going to put myself out there.
Great. So one question that keeps coming up is about, so when you're having a conversation with someone, especially people who have different cultures and backgrounds against you, how would you perform to be confident and find something to say with them? So is there some general grounds that you can have there?
Good question. Yes, general ground is definitely something I would go for, but to reach that, I would be more humble. I wouldn't try to opt for confidence at all. I know what the question, or I assume I know what the question means or where it comes from. You do need confidence to make the first move to say, I am okay with accidentally saying the wrong thing, but I actually want to learn. It is okay. So I do a lot of training, corporate coaching, and like CEOs come and practice their conversations with me, and I do allyship and I do racism and microaggression at work. And so the thing that I always go through is, how do I know what's the right thing to say? How do I know I don't offend someone in the new world? How do nowadays everyone can take offense on anything? And I'm saying, well, what's your underlying motivation? Are you trying to hurt someone? Are you trying to insult someone, or are you genuinely trying? Because only 3% of your communication is related to your words. 7 is paraverbal, so the tone, intonation, and stuff like that. So your tempo, how fast you speak, how your intonation is, where your emphasis is. The rest is body language. The rest is mimicry, gestures, the way you approach someone, the way you walk towards someone, the way you look at someone, is your open, closed. People know what you're about to do before you even utter the first word. So people can sense whether you're genuine or not. So it almost doesn't matter whether you say the right thing or not. It's almost doesn't matter whether you muster the confidence to talk or not, because just do it. Just do it with the humbleness and curiosity. So be humble enough to be wrong and accept in that moment. So I'll give you an example where I was completely wrong once. But also be curious to learn and say, okay, how do I do it better? So where I was wrong, I was in the office once, a different job, and we were making fun of accents. But when I say making fun, it's like we were like doing the accents, and we were actually quite skilled at it. So it was more a talent thing than anything else. So we were doing accents, and there was a lady in the team who was, I think, from one of the African countries, and I put clicks in her names because I thought I was quite skilled at the African accents that come from that area, and I thought it sounded really good. Very bad move. Very, very bad move. Because it was so insensitive of where she came from. And it was so insensitive of just showed my naivety, that massive continent, and I just took one area of that space and generalized it across the entire continent. So what she did was actually quite smart. She let that one slip. And then a day later, she took me to the side and said, you know what? I thought about what you did. And while it was funny, it was also offensive. Like, I know you didn't mean offensive. You probably don't even know where I'm coming from, but this is where I'm from. This is where those clicks are from. It's very far apart. And you generalizing it means you are so ignorant of the difference, to the extent that I don't know whether you care about me or whether you're just doing it. And that's where I felt so sorry. I felt literally so sorry, and I apologized on the spot. And that's where humbleness and curiosity and all that comes from. Because I then actually talked to her about it, and it's like, okay, so from this area, what would the accent be? From this area, what would the accent be? How does this make sense? What's that? And she was open to telling me about these kind of things. You're not always going to get it right, but if your intention is genuine, people will spot, and you can work professionally in a great working environment and create a high performance culture, which everyone goes on about, fancy word, just by being genuine and authentic. When you get it wrong, just accept it, and don't let your ego get in the way.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And we've had some really great questions tonight, and hopefully we've tried to answer them all. So we've got one final question for you. So what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
I get this question a lot. Uh, Nothing new actually. So I've always done. It's what I said to you guys: be humble, be curious, and explore your passions. In my life, I've always done what I'm passionate about because when I got a seat at Cambridge for physics, I rejected it, and I went to my physics teacher in my final A level year and I said, "I don't want to end up like you." And he laughed and he was like, "Yeah, I don't see you there either," because I developed a passion for sports, and then I did a gap year, and I was coaching people in my hockey club. I did adults, kids, disabled people. I was coaching everyone, and I really enjoyed it. Then 2012 was around the corner, so I went to the Olympics and did my dissertation there. It's all very, very hard work. It's all extremely difficult. But when you do something you're passionate about, it doesn't seem like a chore. It just seems like you're growing muscles. It's like you're in a gym or something, and you're actually getting a sense of achievement every time you go out of your comfort zone. So you need to find, and this is the advice probably I would give to my younger self, but that I feel like is on point. You need to find out what you enjoy the most and just relentlessly do that. Don't worry about certain things like, does it bring enough money? Is this job security? What would my parents say? What would society say? Is it a reputable job? Is it that kind of stuff? Because at the end of the day, if you pursue your passions, you will build enough transferable skills that will get you a job that pays enough, that will help you stand in society, that will help you be recognized in certain ways. It's those transferable skills that you develop that make you the unique person who will get hired. So you stand up from a crowd. That's the advice I would give. Be humble to not letting your ego get in the way. Be curious and thirsty to learn and understand that you know a drop in the ocean and you've got so much more to learn, and explore your passions because everything else is going to be a chore.
That's great, and I think that's a good place to leave it, really.
Cool. Thank you very much, guys. If you have any questions, do put them in the chat or write to Stella afterwards. We will try to amalgamate them and we'll try to answer them if you want. You can have my contact details here if you need them. Write to me. If not, find me on LinkedIn, find me on Instagram, find me wherever you want, and just reach out. At the end of this session now, there will be another video playing of what else is happening inside the business. And remember that we're open for positions to apply. So if you would like to, we would love to see your applications. And with that, I hand over back to the team. Thank you, guys.
To find out more about starting your career at Rolls-Royce, check out our socials or search Rolls-Royce Early Careers. Be real, be curious, be ready, be you. Be Rolls-Royce.